Good morning, welcome to Panama City. I am up early and finally ready to talk about questions about what's in my pack. A lot less than when I first started. I didn't even know that through hiking was a thing, so I had done research but about fundamental gear, not about lightweight gear, and the very original pack that I had weighed about 30 kilos. So for now to have my pack down to just under 10 is unimaginable for me. And yet every time I talk about my gear, I think it's impossible to be lighter, and give it another year and it's significantly decreased. I think the difference now is also that instead of being in Patagonia where it's freezing and where I need to have substantially more equipment to keep warm, I'm now traveling not even with a sleeping bag, so that's definitely helped in this process. Nonetheless, I think it's still interesting to go through what I have and to still consider whether or not there are things in here that are vital. I can definitely say that even now I'm still reconsidering some items because I've learned how much more pleasant it is and how more adaptable and quickly I progress the less that I have. And in a weird way, it alleviates some stress by having less things to keep my eyes on. But then at the same time, I can think of an example immediately of something that I don't necessarily need, but then it saves me from being concerned about gear being damaged if I didn't have it. So we'll get to that. I'm going to start with what's on the outside of my pack, things that I really like to be able to have access to throughout the day, or quickly as possible, and then I'll work my way down through to the bottom where I keep my food which is a new thing too, because I used to think that all my food would get crushed and ruined at the bottom of my bag, but in actual fact it does really well down there. So currently I'm using a Z-Packs Ultra women's specific backpack. This is everything. That's everything I have, and there's some food in there still left over that I'm holding on to for when I go into the jungle next week. In the hip pockets of my bag, I keep sunscreen and lip gloss. And I also keep a pair of headphones so that when it's tough in the middle of the day, I can pop these on and listen to an audiobook. On the left side of my pack, I keep all of my toiletries that I might need urgently, and I have a shiwi that's kept in the traditional pocket for water bottles. And I also find that leaves enough space for a spare water bottle or the dirty bottle that I catch water with. Actually, these days on the left side of my bag, I keep my drinking water bottle because I find that it's easier to quickly pull out with a side handle. But this bottle might be changing soon, but I have found that this type of handle on the top of a water bottle is really good for when you are reaching behind and sliding out the bottle and then putting it back in again. On the left-hand side pocket, I also keep my food bowl, which Wombat usually eats out of, and I have a bag that's kept inside there, and this helps keep it secured within the pack pocket. And that bag has small pieces of equipment that I might need throughout the day, like my water filter, my soya squeeze water filter. I have some DEET soap that I apply every morning and every night to keep mosquitoes off me. I have an antiseptic cream which I use if I'm bitten by an insect or get an irritation on my skin that is uncomfortable enough that it needs quick addressing. I keep my knife in here as well for when I need to open packets or make food. I have a spare light above and beyond my torch for when it runs out of batteries. This is definitely something that could be reconsidered. And even still, after all this time, I've got a duplicate, and I have a head net for mosquitoes, which I've used only once, but as I'm going through Central America, I'll probably use it more often. At the very top of my pack, I have my toiletries, so my toothbrush. I usually have one sheet of anti-malarials in here as well, because I need to take them every morning with food, and dental floss. Then I have my electronics bag. I like to keep this higher in my pack because I find that water never gets in through the top, because I have a foam mat that sits on top of the pack, and it seems to prevent any water from ever getting close to the top of my pack. Sometimes I sit it down, or after a full day of rain, the bottom is generally damp, which is why I've started keeping food down there, because if it spoils, it's not a complete disaster. Whereas I'd rather have my clothes dry and my electronics dry. Among my electronics, I have 2 of these batteries. They weigh 150 grams and they are 10,000 milliamps. I can charge my iPhone close to 3 times with one of these. And within my kit, I have my torch is battery run, so I don't recharge that, but I do recharge my headphones, my satellite beacon, my phone, and my UV light water filter for defense against viruses and bacteria. But if the water is dirty, I also have the filter so that I don't have to drink muddy water. I also have a cord to recharge my watch, and if I'm tracking the kilometers that I'm doing, I'd say that I need to charge it once a day, so every single night. And if I'm not tracking, it lasts about a week. I carry a minimal amount of Ziploc bags and a replacement bag liner for my pack, because I'm finding that the battery packs especially puncture through the plastic protection, and I do have them in a Dyneema string pull bag, which I prefer than to having a dry bag, because I just get sick of unrolling and opening that bag every time. And I feel like if I wrap the string around the top of the bag every day, that's just as sufficient to keep the water out. Yet it's the same amount of effort, so why I don't have the dry bags is beyond me, but I prefer it that way for operating in my tent. Right now in Panama City, I am not with Wombat, and because I don't have Wombat with me, I don't have any of his med kits. And so what I did is I took the opportunity to really review what I have in my medical kit and reduce that pack down to this size. And so in here I have anti-malarials, I have antidiarrheals, I have medication for if I can't stop vomiting, and Panadol to break a fever if I have one. I also have a elasticized bandage so that if I sprain something or am bitten by a snake, I can practice first aid. And I could probably get away with just tearing a shirt, but I only have 2 shirts, and I would rather not be without clothing when I'm usually on my own and am navigating when I'm trying to be aware of cultural differences and respectful, but also not put myself at risk. This is the tracking beacon that I use and charge maybe every second day. I have an old school Camelback UV filter for cleaning water that fits on top of a Nalgene bottle or a Camelback bottle. It's rechargeable, and I recharge it possibly once a fortnight. I'm currently wearing my town clothes, and then inside here is everything I wear while I'm hiking. So just a pair of pants, a shirt, socks, and in addition to that, I have an extra pair of socks so that if I am completely covered in mud one day, I don't have to sacrifice my feet while I continue walking. And I have one spare pair of underwear, but only 2 bras. This is the thing that I am constantly still thinking about and I'm unsure of. I have a half size air mat that I use to sleep on, and it covers me from, well, my head down to my thighs. Or I could make a makeshift pillow with my pack and have it pretty much cover my whole body. I'm a slide sleeper, so I fit on it anyhow. But when I stretch out at night, I find that I get cramping, so I have to stretch out. And then I prefer to have a foam mat underneath so that it doesn't get punctured. But this is the foam mat, and I'm wondering if I still need to carry it with me or if I could do without it. I mean, it would look like I had less stuff if I didn't have it because it sits right on the top of my pack. Although my pack is usually empty enough that it's slanted down. And I'm mentioning this because I like to look like I'm not a tourist full of fancy things so that I'm less of a target to people who are being opportunistic. But the true reason that I have it is because I'm just really worried and paranoid that I'm going to get a puncture in my sleeping pad. And I rarely have somewhere to camp where it's completely flat and I don't have things sticking through the base of my tent. And so I just feel as though it would just be a matter of time before I got a puncture, but I don't have the experience to know how long and how often that would really happen. And if people who don't have a foam mat spend a lot of time clearing under their tent before they set their tent up at night, and if I can get away with it, or if in reality it's a good idea to have the mat. But I can definitely tell you that I'm not comfortable enough just sleeping on the mat, particularly with what I can feel underneath me at night. So I'm prioritizing sleep, but I think that is one area where I am still going to and fro on whether or not it's worth having the foam mat or not, because yes, it could very well be that I can get used to and accustomed to having just an air mat. This is a sleep sheet that I use instead of having a sleeping bag. I could absolutely do without this, except that when my clothes are wet, I prefer to strip down and have something to put over my body because you just never know who's around. I think it's fair to say that I spend a lot of my time being really conscious about my personal security, and while it'd be great to not have to care, I do. And for that reason, I also have in my on hand repair kit, tape and Ziplocs, and I use the Ziplocs if I'm ever worried about who's around me to secure my tent by threading the Ziploc through the holes in the zips of my tent door. I'm currently in a Z-Packs extra large tent with the custom poles, which are lighter than hiking poles because I rarely use hiking poles, and when I need them I've been able to find bamboo or something to use for the day or half day and then get rid of it. It's been really good, but I've been having trouble setting it so that when there's a really heavy downpour it's proper storm proof, and I think that could be definitely inexperience with using this kind of a tent, but I am going to trial a new tent in the coming weeks and a new pack to see if they work better for me. And then heavier than everything in the bottom of my pack are things that I've barely eaten, which I will be eating in the next week as I go through the jungle. And I just think it's hilarious that I've been so focused on weight and then I still have leftover food that I've been carrying possibly for a month, but only because it's just through opportunity and surprise pop-up places to eat, I haven't needed it. Speaking of, it's probably really rotten. Okay, and finally I have a dirty water bottle that I catch all my water in. I mean, I don't really distinguish between dirty water bottles and clean bottles because ultimately I just drink straight from this with a filter attached to the top of it. But because I have the wide mouth UV filter to clean viruses out of the water, I need to have a bottle that has a wide mouth fit for that filter, and then I need one that has a narrow fit for the initial filter that cleans out dirt from the water. So I can crush this down, but I never really do. I've had this for months. I could probably get a new one or even a smaller bottle and just fill and empty. But I like to have at least a litre size so that if I have to move quickly and be on the fly, then I can fill it up with a litre and not have to disperse it into this bottle immediately. Another thing to think about. Probably, yeah, I could save space in my pack, which is really the only reason I would want to make this. It's not the weight so much that concerns me, it's just that sometimes it's annoying to have to shove into some part of my pack to get it to fit. Repacking would solve that problem. And the last thing that I have is my rain jacket, and I have a spoon, which is on the outside of my pack as well. These two things live in the front of my pack so that I can get to them quickly if it's raining or if I want to eat. Again, I could probably do without this with the kind of food that I'm eating. Same scenario with the bowl, except that Wombat uses the bowl. So that's everything that I have. It's considerably less than when I left Colombia because I went through all of my kit and got rid of anything that I have especially for Wombat. And things that I thought I could do without that I will review once I get all of my pieces together again with Wombat. That includes things like a tripod, which actually would be really handy for making these videos because right now I'm using books and a plastic tub. And I don't have that at my disposal when I'm in the middle of nowhere. And I could probably thin out my med kit because the reality is I can get these medications here in chemists. And I have leftover winter equipment that I definitely can get rid of. But I am looking forward to going through there and seeing what I choose to put back into my pack. There are unavoidable things like Wombat's shoes, which I really need to have, and he also needs a pair of socks because of the chafe that was occurring between the shoe and his fur. But otherwise, even now, even after leaving my winter pack behind from Patagonia and dropping a lot of equipment, even after then reviewing that in Peru when I went from being in a hiking trailer into a backpack, I was able to reduce my equipment, considering a cold climate, down to about 12.5 kilo. And now I've reduced it even further for when I returned to Colombia and again when I crossed into Panama, and yet I can still see that I'm holding on to things that I probably don't need. So while I'm waiting to enter into the jungle over the coming weeks, I'll be really reconsidering whether I truly need things like the foam pad. And because I'm receiving all of my equipment that I've left behind again in the coming weeks, that for me was a really good opportunity to trial and see how I manage without all of the different pieces of equipment. But I wasn't brave enough to leave the foam pad behind again because it's just so frustrating to try and replace any of my equipment when I don't have a list of people traveling through or a bunch of volunteers who are ready to bring things to me when they're traveling. So if you are traveling to Central America at any point in the next year, please let me know if you're willing to bring some resupply equipment for me so that at least I have that peace of mind for when things need replacing. I'll now repack my bag the way that I like to pack it. so that you can see how I do that. So the first thing I do is I put food that I'm not going to be using on the first day at the bottom of my bag, which I can get out when I'm in my tent later at night, and then resupply by putting them on the outer part of my pack or at the very top of my pack. I'll just get rid of this right away. It sits on the outside of the pack. But it can be really annoying because it pushes in on the bag, but I really don't have that much stuff, so it's ultimately not a big deal. Next, because I don't need it for warmth, but for privacy, at the very bottom I put my sleep sheet. And then I put my town clothes at the bottom as well, because I literally only use these when I'm in town to wash my hiking clothes. Next I put the sleeping pad, plastic bags and med kit. Electronics. Toiletries. That's it. That's all I have. Not true. Then at the very top, so I have all of that go into a plastic sleeve, which is at the bottom of my pack. And the last thing that I put in is the tent, which goes at the very top, and even when it's a little bit wet, I have it in this sleeve, and I close the plastic sleeve that everything else is in, and it keeps everything dry. And then I'm still able to put my foam pad on the outside of my pack, which I use when I'm having a break, and because it doesn't fit into the hiking bag itself without taking up an extraordinary amount of room, or being annoying to get to when I want to have a break and use it through the day. The water bottle goes on the outside on the left-hand side. Dirty water bottle goes on the front of the pack or on the right-hand side. And sun protection goes in the hip belt. And then after all of that, this goes up the very top. I tend to fold it so that it sits a little bit more flat with the thin end facing the top of the bag. Ready? And I'm ready. And all of that weighs under 10 kilos, and I have about a kilo of leftover food. That's an exaggeration, about 500 grams worth of food at the bottom. If you have some insight, or you can help me amalgamate equipment, or give me some tips on how you prefer to pack, or how I can reduce my gear generally, especially if you know about the foam mat versus the inflatable one, and I mean no, not just supposedly, but you have real-time experience, I'd really like to hear what you've done to solve that problem, or if you also carry the two, keeping in mind that it's not just something that I can repair or replace easily without having a whole team of friendly travelers ready to re-kit me when I need it. See you out there.